And now time to return to our political discussion checkpoint. And joining me, gentlemen, you missed last week, but they're back now. To my extreme right, Derek Banga. In the middle, Professor Edward Kisiangani and Paul Achar. To all of you, it's good to see you again. It has been so interesting just watching the performance, of course, of the presidential candidates who we had time to talk about in the previous weeks. But now let us see their reactions after the win. And we want to begin with one Uhuru Kenyatta, of course. Yesterday, after getting his certificate from the IEBC, he then headed out to the Catholic University, which basically was the nerve center, if you like, of the Jubilee coalition. There he made his first address as president-elect. Let's listen to what he had to say. All right, our apologies for that. Let's just give our operators time to get that clip right. Of course, we are about to discuss how the men who were presidential candidates and one who now is president-elect performed in his very first address to the nation, a speech that was delivered at the Catholic University, which was the Jubilee's nerve center. Let us now listen into President-elect Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday.
Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta.
My fellow Kenyans, my pledge to you today is that as your president, I will work on behalf of all the citizens of this republic, regardless of their party affiliation. I will honor the will of Kenyans and ensure that my government protects their rights and acts without fear or favor in the interests of our nation. To all those of you who have won various seats, regardless of what party or coalition you belong to, let us remember that we are first and foremost Kenyans, and that the people have bestowed upon us the responsibility to work for them. I today extend a hand of friendship and cooperation to you so that together we can truly serve the Kenyan people. Ladies and gentlemen, in the nearly 5 decades since Kenya's independence, we have made great strides as a nation.
And there you have it, his maiden address to the nation. What did you think?
Well, a couple of things. I've noticed commentators are calling it an acceptance speech. I'd like to correct them. This wasn't an acceptance speech. It was a victory speech. He made his acceptance speech when he accepted the nomination of his party to run for president. But a couple of things you notice. You realize that as he walks in, he has a spring in his step. Something has definitely changed. He looks absolutely happy about what the decision, having won. But you can see him becoming more presidential, even the way he's dressed. Those are some of the things that I've observed.
What do you think about the content, though? He chose very key things, talking about working together, an inclusive government. Just your thoughts on the key messages that he chose to deliver for his first address.
I think if you look at what Uhuru has done, he has given us the correct message for the moment. He is very lucky. He has fought a battle and then overcome certain odds, and he has an overwhelming majority of 6.12 million people who voted for him. So the message he's giving us is the correct message for the moment, a message of reconciliation. He's extending a hand of friendship to those he has beaten in the elections, and he's also telling us that we can work together. He'll work on behalf of all Kenyans across party lines, and he's not going to discriminate against anybody. That is the most wonderful message to come from a presidential candidate who has won and who has had a battle with his opponent. So he's sending a message of reconciliation for the entire country, and that is really the message we need for now, for a highly polarized election that we have had. I think it was a beautiful message.
Yeah, and let me just alert our viewers, of course, if you're hearing a little background noise, that is tomorrow's standard newspaper that has gone to press, so do excuse us for that. That is the noise that you're hearing, the paper, which should be hitting the streets early tomorrow morning. Derek, your thoughts?
You know, a victory speech in the life of a presidency is one of the key speeches that a president is going to give. I'm glad to see that he prepared for this particular speech. He had teleprompters. I think this is one of the first or one of the few times that we've actually seen a president deliver a speech in this country with teleprompter. So he was reading his speech, but he had certainly been coached, and the way he was delivering it, I think he struck a chord with the majority of people. Now, the speech didn't reach sort of the soaring rhetoric that perhaps I would have liked in terms of that.
Like what?
Well, you know, we're talking about, for example, I wanted to see more talking about inclusiveness. I wanted to see more of a call to action. I wanted to see what is going to be different in this presidency that differs it from, you know, other leadership that we've had in this particular country. I didn't see that coming through the speech. There were some basic notes that he struck. You know, he was conciliatory, he had a bit of grace, but I really wanted to see that call to action where we would rally around some of those words and say, we now have a new president, let's work to make this country better.
I don't think that that is the correct position, because if we blame him for not being so inclusive, this was a short speech to accept, you know, to recognize the verdict the people had made. So therefore, he has another speech he's going to give after he's inaugurated. So that is when he will tell people, this is my policy, this is how I want to be inclusive in my government. So this was a short thing to just tell Kenya, I recognize the mandate you have given me, and he is not yet sworn in as president. So he cannot start talking about policy. There is already another president in State House. So he has to wait for his moment. His moment has not come, and he's going to do it very well.
And bear in mind, of course, that he had been watching, we understand, he had been watching Raila Odinga. You remember that, of course, it took quite a bit of time since his arrival at the Catholic University to the time he actually took to the stage. And we understand he was watching the address by Raila Odinga, who was saying, essentially, I don't recognize you as a winner, and I'm going to be going to court for this. Your thoughts, Paul?
I would, you know, slightly disagree with Prof. This speech, from the onset, you can tell that he had been practicing. Everything is well scripted, so he should have included a couple of things. He did not paint a compelling picture of where he wants to take the country over the next few years. He did not do that.
That was the right time for it?
That was the right time to be able to include a bit of that. He did good to, he didn't gloat, he expressed extreme humility and extending a parity of goodwill to his challengers. That was good. And also he rallied his supporters to work with him, and also called onto the supporters of his challengers to work with him. That was pretty good.
I mean, you could see
he did not paint a
you could see he was a little bit tense also. I mean, this was a speech that he was giving obviously for the first time. You know, the way he was, for example, gripping the lectern. Again, the more of these speeches he gives, the more versed you'll become in terms of using your hands and body language, so that the message actually matches what your nonverbal communications.
Or the weight of hearing somebody's going to court to oppose this, which do you think?
You know what, he had just been handed over that certificate. Who knows what sort of emotions were running through him. I think he needed time to sort of absorb that information, to be able to now internalize it, and then turn around and give us that victory speech.
To be fair to him, he has given direction. I'm embracing everybody. That is the direction he wants to give. He says, when my government will embrace everybody, he's extending an olive branch to his opponents. That's where the direction is. The country is highly polarized. If you look at this election, 5.3 million people did not vote for him. And he has 6 point something who voted for him. He says, I want to bring you together and impress you as your president. That is more important, because what this country needs is healing. Before you even give them the agenda, you need them to come as one team. And what he has done is just to give that reconciliation, and it's the right thing to do before he can even lay the background for what he wants to do with regard to policy and with regard to implementation of his manifesto.
But in your opinion, he gave the most important speech that Kenyans needed to hear, which was one that he'll have an inclusive government.
Yes.
If I can move the conversation forward, and perhaps to a lighter note, you did see, of course, in the beginning, the way he walked in, and you talked about the spring in his step, his greeting with William Ruto, and then the family portrait, if you like. Do they look every bit the first family? Are they our equivalent of Michelle and Barack Obama?
Who am I to go that far and say that? But certainly that is a first, where we're seeing a young family. We're seeing him with his wife. You did a piece on her a little bit earlier. So again, we as Kenyans, the benchmark has been set high. We have seen first families. You talked about the Obama's family. So we also want to see our leaders, our president, also in terms of emulating some of those positive things. So I think it was great to see the first family up on stage congratulating him. And again, it humanizes him. It gives us that emotional connection. He's one of us and not just a politician.
In my opinion, Anne, they may have looked like the first family if you look at it from the context of the United States and the practice in the West. But I thought that in future, African presidents should be more creative, so that we don't want to see what is just an Obama thing being repeated in Africa. So they still have a chance to do some creativity, even with the vice president, so that the deputy president, so that we see something really African in it. I thought even in terms of attire, we need some Africanness in it. So the first lady can go the African way, and then even the president can go a little African.
National television.
Yes.
Really?
I think it was. I think it was good.
Yes.
For the first time, we're seeing those young children of his. We've never had that. I think the last time we had that was when he was a child himself in State House. So it's something different. It's something definitely that's resonating with many people. I believe it's positive.
What do you imagine, gentlemen? We saw that clip and the contrast between herself, Margaret Kenyatta, and the outgoing First Lady, who was known really to just speak her mind and be very, very public, save for perhaps the last year or a little bit more than that, where she has shied away from public life. I would not be as presumptuous as to say what she should or should not wear or how far she should go out. But generally, because this office is not truly detailed in terms of what it is supposed to perform, just your thoughts on what the office of the First Lady should be about, and how it can perhaps be an inspiration for the country.
Well, one big difference, already she is tech savvy. I mean, really, when they say that Julia
Yes,
digital,
she's on Twitter.
she's already on
Yes.
tweeting, so that's a big difference over there. Again, we want to see someone I think that we can connect with, perhaps coming up with a great cause that Kenyans can rally behind, and just showing us that she is 100% behind her husband and supporting him at all times. I think that would be.
And again, she has the correct poise, because she has a soft look that makes people want to relate with her. She doesn't disappoint. She looked a little laid back because probably the occasion is not the one for her to show her attributes as a first lady. But definitely you can see that she's ready to become first lady. She didn't look out of place.
What are the attributes of a First Lady?
I think you need to be emotionally passionate with the people that you are addressing, and you also need to be friendly to them. I did think she looked a bit too tough for us to relate with. She could offer a smile even in that tense moment, and that is what a First Lady is. She must carve out an image of a mother who wants to embrace everybody, and I didn't think she disappointed. She didn't disappoint.
Paul, if I could come to you, in a previous rally, I think it was the final rally the Jubilee coalition had, the president-elect, well then the campaigner, handed her the mic to speak to the audience, perhaps say hello or something like that, but she shied away from it. And generally she has actually shied away from public life, save for the fact that she appears next to her husband. Is it really necessary for her to be vocal at all, or could she just play her role, which number one is wife and mother?
I think it was an impromptu presentation for her. She might not have been ready, but hey, now being the First Lady, she's got to be ready. And many people will want to hear her voice. I expect that in coming days, she'll probably have somebody who's going to work with her, help her, find issues that are dear to her, which she's going to be able to articulate and express that to the rest of the citizens.
People it's a difficult position, honestly, because she is not the one, who's the politician. My assumption is really she.
I think she's also a citizen, and she shouldn't be looked at just as a mother and a wife. She has some feelings about how Kenya should move, and she could just provide the advice to the president to move this country forward in a particular direction. But something that struck me about her is the fact that when the president-elect was talking, she looked laid back, as if to say, I can't believe this has happened. So she didn't cheer the president in a way that you would see it, although she didn't look hostile. But I think probably that is her style, and we had better probably get used to.
Very interesting you should mention that, because it leads us to the next clip, which is this Uhuru Kenyatta outside right after making that first address. He moves outside, of course, with his deputy president, William Ruto. Listen to what he has to say, and whether you at home think at all, he too may have appeared a little surprised, just, taking it all in and understanding that he may just very well be the next man to lead this country at the very highest level. Let's take a listen.
Tunawashukuru Wakenya wote mahali ambapo walipo, kwa sababu walijitokeza kwa njia ambaye ilitisha wengi. Ya tatu, nichukue nafasi hii pia kuwashukuru wananchi wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, kwa sababu wakati nchi nyingi zilikuwa na hofu ya kwamba Wakenya hawawezi kuchaguana kwa amani, mumeonesha dunia mzima ya kwamba sisi ni taifa la amani.
And he chose to deliver his entire speech outside in Kiswahili, which I think we can all laud. Throughout his speech, he had to keep stopping, laughing. A lot of the crowd around him were laughing as well. What do you think they were laughing about?
He seems in his element. I think he's been campaigning for 2 years now. When he gets out to speak to the crowds, he comes alive. You can see him using his gestures, but at some point he loses his train of thought, and you can see him laughing and scratching his head a bit. Now, that makes him appear human. It increases his likability. You're like, okay, yeah, you're the president-elect, but you're also human. You can forget what you're about to say. I think so.
Yeah, I think even his voice changed. I don't know if you noticed the cadences of his voice. Suddenly he was, I don't know if it was channeling, Martin Luther King or someone like that, but even the rhetoric now becomes a little bit more soaring. The speaking to that crowd, and clearly I think this is where he is in his element.
It's very interesting you said that, because he would speak sort of like this, and really punctuate certain words, which is not Uhuru's typical style. Do you think it was conscious? Is he trying to take on perhaps a more presidential tone, if you like? And you've referred to Martin Luther King, or may this just happen sort of in the spur of the moment?
I think this is also part of the coaching and the training that he has as part of his communication style, and who knows, maybe there was a video that was shown, and maybe subconsciously he is sort of trying to invoke this. When you're speaking to a large crowd, it is much different than when you're speaking in an enclosed space, and so you need to be over the top. You need to be bigger. Your voice needs to have a little bit more rhythm. Your gestures need to be bigger. It's one way of creating that emotional attachment when you're speaking to a large crowd. Now, we saw him doing it during the campaign, but this was, the speech that he was giving after he had been, sworn in as not sworn in, but when he had been selected as a presumptive president.
You say, when I saw him speak like that, I was reminded about how Professor Ali Mazrui described Kenyatta and Mboya. And one time he said that give Kenyatta a whole stadium, the Jomo Kenyatta, the old man, and then allow him to speak Kiswahili. Mboya will run away. Then give Mboya a parliament or a parliament, and then allow them to debate in English. Kenyatta will run away. Now what he was demonstrating that he can do both Kenyatta, his father, and Mboya. So what he did inside the hall was Mboya style. And when he came out, he captured the imagination of the nation by even asking his own audience to join him. And that is a stadium style that his father was very good at. So, but then he took advantage of that also to communicate to the outside world that, look, this is the following I have. And that's why he allowed the audience to be part of his message, and they could complete what he did not say, and the symbolism he was giving about how people thought about Kenya. And so I think he did it very well.
I like the way he looks. He looks presidential, honestly. He looks presidential, and let's expect to see a lot more dark suits, white shirts, blue ties and red ties in days to come.
The importance of this communication is to connect with a nation, and he certainly laid the marker for that. So I certainly give him a tick in both those boxes in terms of making even us, who may or may not have necessarily voted for him, feel confident. And that is the importance of communication at that level.
Fantastic. Let's move on now. Ahmed Isaka-san, the man who had tremendous pressure over the last 6 days, he took to the podium, perhaps possibly for the last time, perhaps before another election, and went ahead to explain the challenges of putting together this massive vote. Let's listen to what he had to say.
Our task was to conduct and manage a rather complex election under a new constitution. No electoral management body within and beyond the region has had the courage and resolve to do what we have done. We knew we were venturing into huge logistics, high cost, if not unforgiving, high expectations. We put our best foot forward and we resolved to get it right. While we were cognizant of the African proverb which says, never test the depth of a river with both feet, we still went ahead to invest and deploy the use of ICT in the elections management with success and disappointments.
I think he did enough to vindicate him and his team from the obvious flaws that there were in the process, the massive challenges that there were with the electronic tallying system, and the fact that I suppose he knew, given what CORD was about to do minutes later, which is basically announce the challenging of that election that he had carried out, he must have known that he needs to sort of clear his name. Was it good enough?
I think, Anne, what the chairman of the Electoral Commission is saying is there are challenges, and we expected challenges in this election. What he's saying that we had 6 people to vote for, that's correct, we knew it, and he knew it. And that was beyond him in terms of number of people to vote for, because you need a constitutional change to make sure that you reduce the number or even have 2 days of voting. But what he did not say, he should have said, this election has happened with these challenges, especially the fact that the machines failed on first day. Who takes responsibility? Because I don't think that you can take it anywhere. He should have been humble enough to say, look, I think these machines failed. We are the ones who purchased them, the software, we are the ones, we take responsibility for this, so that it is not taken to any other person. And I'm sure that in the courts tomorrow, maybe some of the people who have challenged might talk about the issue of what? The issue of machines. And the responsibility doesn't lie with the opponents or the contestants, but it's going to lie with the Electoral Commission. He didn't explain that, and it did not look like he's in a hurry to take responsibility. That is an institution that should be accountable for that, and so he didn't do it. And I'm still disappointed about him and the Electoral Commission.
I think you know, his Prof has talked about the content of his message. For me, I would want to look at how he delivered his message. He seems to be calm, which is good, because I would assume he was under extreme pressure, and being calm kind of inspires confidence. However, he seems to swallow his words, which makes the listener, you could easily miss certain words that he's talking. So and he also speaks in a monotone. Now, not too good when he has to deliver a long speech. He could have done a little to do, he could have worked a bit on vocal variety, on his intonation.
But does he sound like an honest man to you and an exhaustive man?
He seems authentic. He seems authentic, and he also projects the quality of humility. Now, humility is one of those aspects, one of those attributes that connects you to an audience out there. But I believe the delivery could have, there's a lot more that he could have done.
I think the kind of humility that you're talking about, Paul, is not a humility where you don't take responsibility. These challenges, some of them were beyond him, like I've said. But there were also challenges which were within the Electoral Commission. And he will say, we were unable to handle this, and we take responsibility. That is the humility we are expecting from a Kenyan who is heading an institution like the Electoral Commission. He didn't, so I don't see any humility.
You know, I would have liked to see him talk about the challenges that they faced a little bit earlier. And instead of waiting until the last minute to talk about that, I think that the information flow was a little bit slow in terms of what was going on. At times I felt like I had no idea what was going on. We had to wait until what, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon for this announcement, and you know, we were rarely getting updates on a regular basis telling us what was going on. Now, having said that, Grace under fire, certainly I am going to give him props for that in terms of being able to work under very difficult and extreme circumstances. However, I think all of the commissioners up there really needed to work on their presentation skills, needed to work on, you know, even giving out information, facts and figures, you know, having some sort of visual at the back there. I mean, they were giving us numbers.
You got too quiet at the start. Come on now. Show some gratitude.
You see, Anna,
you know, communication is such an important thing. And what you don't want is to, as they say, have a misinterpretation of that communication, a failure to communicate. And if somebody feels that those numbers, for some reason, they don't understand them, and so there is some monkey business going on, that's sort of the beginning of people now start wondering if the whole process was fair. And part of that could have been solved in terms of the way he communicated some of those statistics.
And in my opinion, it was a very simple thing. And Hassan doesn't look like a person who consults so much. That is the impression I get.
Well, we don't know that.
When you are communicating, people can read, because that's what we are looking at. We might be even misreading.
You can read that he did not talk to other people, or
yes,
so.
you can do that reading, and it could be a wrong reading. That's something that you should know. But what I would see is that in terms of communication that my friend is talking about, he looked like he was in a fix, but then he doesn't know how to communicate the fix and overcome it. So he needed to recruit the public on his side by just saying, this thing is normal, we have gone through it, and they joined him to celebrate the fact that they failed, but they can correct the mistake.
Perhaps a final remark here.
What they needed was what I would call a standard communication manual for all the officers, for all the commissioners.
Yes.
We had some of the commissioners who did not inspire confidence. Some of them tried to lecture the audience at some point, and the audience didn't take it really kindly. So in future, I think some of these commissions need what you call a standard communicating manual that each of the commissioners is trained on, so that we can have a uniform and certain standards.
Or a standard spokesperson, or a standard, not a standard spokesperson, but maybe 1 or 2 people whose job is merely to give us the information.
They had a very good lady there who talked very little, but she looked like they didn't use her full potential. I think she was called Tabitha.
Well, she's a communication
director. That is the one thing you have used.
Technically speaking, it is not her job to announce results. But I think Kenyans would have more credibility in the commissioners themselves. But we must move on and give it to them. High pressure job, probably barely slept a wink. They may have been just exhausted. Well, let's move on to our final clip, and it is from the man who really just shocked the country with his performance as far as how you voted for him. Let's listen to Mohammed Abdubadiba in an exclusive interview with KTN.
No, what went through my mind was humanity can be tamed. Humanity can accept that there is a problem, and we can now sit down and find out how do we solve this problem. There is room for discussion. Yeah, they are not fixed as I thought. They are flexible. I don't think there was that tough and organized structure that this is an advisor of this, People were wondering when they find me and they are told Mwalimu is interested in getting there. But what I was doing at any given time, I was consulting my friends. And there's this issue, what do I do?
All right, Mohammed Diba there. He's the guy who technically joked his way to the national platform. What do you think about what he's saying? And part of it is you might just see him before 17.
Humanity can be tamed. I don't know what he is saying. They need to have a dictionary of Didaisms. Listen, we fell in love with the man. Let's, face facts. There is a certain authenticity, shooting from the hip, that a lot of people want to see and is refreshing in terms of our leadership. I think he needs to be a little bit more savvy in terms of his communication, but there's no doubting that is, what you see is what you get.
I think Dida has explains what our society is. It is a dilemma the society has, because there are people who have a lot of problems and they don't know how to explain them. There are people who are having ailments, but when they go to the doctor, they can't even explain to the doctor what they are suffering from. Millions of Kenyans have similar problems. This guy seems to think there is an issue with Kenya, and he can make a contribution. His greatest undoing is he doesn't know how to explain what he thinks Kenya is ailing from, but you can see the guy from his face, he has a problem he's pointing to, and you can almost believe him there is an issue. So what he needs to do is to get back to the cooks, because he is uncooked in a political sense, and since he's not cooked, he's not yet ready for eating. So therefore, he must get out of himself, try to explain, and maybe hire some of these gentlemen around here to tell him how to explain his ailment so that the doctors can treat him. That is what he lacks, but he is showing there is a problem and he thinks he can offer a solution.
But could it be a case of, if you can't, how does the phrase go? Something like, if you can't confound them with wisdom, then baffle them with madness. But the guy needs to make a point, and I've interviewed him before, and he is very, very aggressive. He is one of those people who really barely lets you, conclude your statement, and must go on and on and on. Perhaps that's just his style, and it seems to have worked for him over how many thousands of votes. I mean, he was
but that is the point, Anne. You must ask why, even without the capacity to explain what he really wants, he was able to beat very articulate fellows like Martha Karua. What is this? Maybe that's what Kenyans want. They want such a fellows.
Dida has an ability to connect by speaking very simple things in a very simple way. He comes across as your common man on the street, the person who you'd seat, who would ride the bus with you. That's Dida. He also comes across as authentic. He may not articulate what he's saying in a very complicated manner, but he's genuine about what he's saying, and he seems to really mean it. A couple of weeks back, I think there were a lot of debates on whether the presidential debates would make any difference. Well, I think we got our answer. He was a beneficiary.
Okay. Do you imagine, Prof, this is a man that we should expect to hear from very much in the coming years, if you like? He says he's heading back to class, but he's not ruling out politics. Is he a serious candidate who perhaps in a couple of years maybe somebody Kenyans will look to en masse and say, you've got my vote?
We do not know much about Dida, and the actual Dida is not yet out. He first wanted to excite the platform, the political platform, and tickle people in the armpits, and that is what he succeeded to do. After tickling them in the armpits, now they know Dida exists, and after that, he's going to come out, and we shall see a real Dida. And I'm sure with his good education, he's likely to spring another surprise as a very serious presidential candidate come 2017.
He looks though to have aged a bit considerably. I think the stress of presidential campaign.
A three-week campaign
more white hair.
More white hair.
He seems he has the authenticity down pat. He has connected with a lot of voters. Now he needs to start working a little bit more on the leadership qualities. So if he does run in 2017, he will be a credible candidate.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, I will leave it at that. I want to thank you. It's good to see you all again. Our Derek Banga to the far right, Professor Edward Kisiangani, and of course, Paula Char. Thank you for your time and for your thoughts. KTN Sunday Night Within Choice 2013 is about to take a short break, but on the other side of the election center, Nicholas Mudimba has all the sporting news. Nicholas, what's up?